Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Hi, I'm Ken. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Ken. Glad to be here with this wonderful first Mississippi Valley group, roundup or whatever. I want to thank Mary Beth for inviting me to come. It's been a very eventful trip. I landed in Bloomington on Friday night, and my friend Fred, who I sponsor, picked me up, and we headed over here. Now, Fred had the idea we were 120 miles from here, about 50 miles light. And we were on roads that I'm just not used to. There was 2 lanes and no lights. And I asked Fred if he would mind if I shared some of the events of that trip, and he said no, otherwise I wouldn't pursue it. But we kept encountering police cars. Apparently there was a vehicle that had been used in a holdup or something, and it was out there, and there were all these cars all over Route 24, which I'm very familiar with. And then when we got to the illustrious town of Ripley, for those of you who don't know, it's in Brown County, we hit a deer. And I thought, hell, this is the warm-up. I can't wait to get to the convention, you know? And then we sought out the state police. Now, I'll tell you right there, that's a lot of growth. And we made a legal report of the incident. Now, Fred had a license, which I was proud of. He had a registration for the vehicle we were driving. He had the insurance papers that are required, apparently. And then the policeman asked a question, and that is, were you wearing your seatbelts? Since this is an AA meeting and we practice rigorous honesty, we were not wearing our seatbelts. But Fred responded in such alcoholic fashion, I almost wanted to go over and hug him. What I heard him say, slowly and deliberately, was, yes. Followed by, and thank God we were. Now, I could sit down, and that's AA. No, I mean, that is the deal, right there. I'd like to see the hands of those people collectively who have a year or less of sobriety. If you just raise your hands, all of you. Oh, great. Well, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't know where you are in your first year, but I was like John Wayne Bobbitt. Someone asked him, do you want to get back with your wife? And he said, one part of me says yes, and one part of me says no. And that's where I was at my first year of sobriety. Now, I'm not going to spend a long time on the drunk-a-log because, to be very candid with you, most of it I do not remember. And the things I remember most vividly never happened. So it doesn't leave you much of a story. I will just tell you, I not only drank things that hit the spot, I drank things that removed it. You know? I became a codependent while drinking, since that's a popular word now. I was a codependent. You know, I remember asking silly questions, but important questions like, is my fly open? And someone would say no. And I'd say, well, it should be, because I'm peeing. You know? And it's very easy to become dependent like that. Now, I was listening to all the speakers. I enjoyed them all, and some of you, I'm sure, know that November is a very special month in AA. It's Gratitude Month, and Bill Wilson started that back in 1949 and coupled it in with the traditions. And initially, it was hooked in with Thanksgiving, and then it was extended to the whole month. And I don't know what your definition is of gratitude, but as I have been here longer, my definition has expanded. And today I am thankful for every single human being and every event in my life that got me here. And that includes people who at the time I didn't think did me an awful lot of good. But everything that happened to me rendered me into Alcoholics Anonymous. And everything was important. And I was listening to the speakers, and in their own way, that's what they were talking about. Dick and Peg were talking about sponsorship and how thankful they were for it. I love to watch Peg talk because she has more animation with her hair than any speaker I've ever seen. She spoke out in our area, and at that time she was talking about canaps or something that was shooting off, and she always messes her hair, but it always goes right back the way it was. It's like, it's very interesting to observe. But the deal is that they were grateful for sponsorship. And then Gary this morning was talking about how he was grateful for being reunited with his family in a very special way. And this afternoon, the Al-Anon speaker, my friend Carl, I think what he was most grateful for was that Claire had such a good story behind the cowboy boots. You know, she had something I could have bought, you know. But the deal is that gratitude, sometimes today people like to view themselves as having gotten worse cards than somebody else. And you know, the bottom line is we all got the cards we got. And that's just the way it is. It's sometimes you have to work that out in your own program, go to your sponsor and share that. Like, you know, I didn't know I got the worst cards. Weepers and whiners, we call them in California, you know. They're so depressive. They even dream depressive. You know, they can't sleep at night. You say, count sheep. And they say, I can't. The sheep whine. You know? They say things like, I don't want to jump over the fence. Can't you open the gate? You know? And that's just the way they see life. You know, they see life through those kind of glasses. Like, that's just the way it is. And it's very sad because as you're here longer, what you realize is that everything in life is perceptional. It's just perceptional. It's what you think is going on, not what's going on. And it causes so much problems for some people because they just perceive that someone's out to get them. And really what it is they're intimidated and afraid to live life. There was a cartoon in the paper the other day someone sent me. I'm not a big cartoon reader, but it was Gary Trudeau. And it was kids who were in a college class, and they were getting ready for the first exam. And he was making the announcement, the teacher was making the announcement, all of you who were born of alcoholic parents, came from a dysfunctional home, or have survivors of something, you have to fill out a special victim form. And this form is due in by October the 31st, because the first exam is November 1st. If you do not get this form in, you will be judged on your performance like everybody else, you know? And one kid raised his hand and said, well, I'm a procrastinator. Can I have a few extra days? In which he responded, no, we decided 31st of October was the cutoff date. You know, sometimes in AA there's good news and there's bad news, and we don't know the good news and we don't know the bad news. We get them confused. You know, it's like the guy who had some penis surgery. Actually had prostate cancer, and he went in and the doctor did the surgery, and he woke up and he said, how did I do, doctor? And the doctor said, I got good news and I got bad news. He said, what's the good news? He said, we're able to save your penis. He said, oh, thank God. He said, what's the bad news? He said, it's under your pillow. You know? So there are times in life where we can't tell the difference between the good news and the bad news. The good news is the bad news, and the bad news is the good news. And it's so perceptional, you know. I know I'm getting to be an old timer because now when I hear people say there's too much crack, I find myself pulling up my slacks, you know, like it's like so things change, you know. There's a changing that goes on all the time. And if you read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is our basic text, I mean, you read things in there that lead you to believe. In the beginning, you just read them, and then after a while, you begin to see this is so perceptional. You know, we have a line in there that says something to the effect in the 4th chapter to the agnostic. It says, living on a spiritual plane or living a life of alcoholism are not easy alternatives to face. They are for everybody else. You read chapter 3, they talk about the jaywalker and the gates of hell, and you go up to the average guy and say, well, you want to live this way or this way? He doesn't have to take much time to collect his thoughts. It's like, you know, no, I'll go with the spiritual way where happy, joyous, and free. You know, only alcoholics would even pose that question. You know, because we have these minds that are so busy generating stuff that isn't true that we can't tell, as is read in the literature, you know, truth from fiction. And it's just an amazing, amazing process. I love being sober. I love being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the fact that when I get up in the morning, I know I have a chance to go and live life. See, I never knew that before. There were times in my life where I would get up in the morning and I was so afraid of what was going to come next that I became almost paralyzed. But today, as a result of having a sponsor and being sponsored and being in AA and having some time here, I get to see that this life is so very important that you don't have time to waste to think about it. You just go and live it. And in the living, you seem to get all the answers you need. Now, I don't know about the hereditary part of the disease, but I know in my family we're divided into 2 groups. Either you're in AA or you need it. You know? It's just that simple, you know? And I have a brother who is now working at the courthouse who's having a lot of problems working at the courthouse. And because he still likes to drink a little bit. And he sees things when he calls me and tells me what's going on in his life. It's almost like listening to me 25 years ago. It's like you make up these scenarios like everybody else is getting better cards than you. Everybody has an advantage but you. And life is just so heavy. And then I go to meetings, fortunately, and hang out with guys who tell me just the opposite, that they don't know what's going on. They never knew what was going on, but this is the best it's ever been. And, you know, that's why it's nice to come to these little kind of bozo events. I mean, you get a chance to see people and you say, well, if that sicko can make it, you know, I can make it, you know. And you come here with the idea that you're going to have a good time, and guess what happens? You have a good time. And, you know, you heard Peg talk about the other night, what happens to people after they're here a while? They decide, you know, I want to go do something else. One of the great observations I made in AA is that if someone doesn't want to come, nothing will stop them. You know, they just find reasons to come. It's TV, it's this, it's that. I'm doing so well at work, I'm going to work more and go to AA less. And eventually what happens, as we all know, because you hear the stories, is they lose track of what it's all about. And they get caught up in all this other nonsense. I love the guys I sponsor. I don't think, you know, collectively we're not a bright group. You know, I guess that's the best way to put it. You know, I always kid that when we give out tokens in our group, we say, how long are you sober? Guys go, that's just the way they are. They just don't know, you know. I mean, and the nice part of it is there's really nothing to know. You know, we come here and we do some real basic things. I mean, I remember when I moved from New York to California, and I thought, like, the whole world had been changed around. I was 4 years sober, and I went from one ocean to another ocean. And when I got out there, the first thing I noticed is that, you know, because I'm pretty observant, is that the beach was on the wrong side. You know, it's like... and they talk so differently in California. They say things like, we'll make a 12-step call on him. We're going to make a 12-step call. In my neighborhood, they used to say, go put the hit on this guy. You know? It had a whole different meaning. You know, we knew what putting the hit on someone meant. Man, you took him to a meeting. You know, you just picked him up, whether he was ready to go or not, you just snagged him. He went. And then when I got out to California, they used to talk about career choices. You know, what is your career choice? In Brooklyn, we used to say, hey, yo, go get a job. You know? Get off the corner. Try to do something that's not indictable, you know? And make your mother proud, you know? And the bottom line was it was a different deal. And yet it was the same deal because people were staying sober in both places. I was sharing with someone this morning that when I was new, someone took me, instead of taking me to the diner where we normally went to eat before the meetings, they took me down Clinton Street and they pointed to a brownstone and like it was a sacrament. They said, that's where Bill and Lois started AA. Ooh, I didn't know who the hell Bill was, you know? I asked the big question. We ain't going to have time to get to the diner, you know? Like, all I wanted to know if I could get some cholesterol and go on to the meeting because you needed cholesterol to go to those meetings. You know, of course, you used to have these guys come up and they would talk for 15 minutes apiece, and it was like, they always said the same thing, how happy they were. I'm really an alcoholic. I'm happy. And you say, oh, wow, this is exciting, you know, like, I am so glad I'm sobering up so I can say, oh, I'm kidding, I'm not that, you know. And it's like, Jesus, you know. And then after we leave, they never let you go home. I mean, it was like you were captured. You were in the car and people would talk to you. Actually, they talk around you. Like, yeah, all of us are working. How about you, Ken? You know, all of us are doing legal things. How about you, Ken? You know? And you wanted like to sneak out of the car, you know, and you couldn't sneak out of the car because they locked the doors. And then you'd get to the diner and you'd take more of this pounding about what you were going to do. Like, you got any interviews tomorrow? You're going to go get a job tomorrow? You're going to do that? And I used to think, boy, these are the nosiest group of people I've ever met in my life. And yet what happened was, as a result of watching them do things, I learned how to do things. By the result of watching my sponsor get up and go to work and raise kids, I knew what it was to get up and go to work and raise kids. You know, that's why they say stick with the winners, because success leaves clues. And the clues are in the actions. They're not in what they tell you. I mean, all the verbiage here could be set aside. You know, Al-Anons have a great piece of literature. It's called The Merry-Go-Round of Denial. And in that piece of literature, it says, if you want to really understand an alcoholic, turn down the sound. It's the words that are tricky. You know, you have your seatbelt on? Yeah, thank God we did. Love you, love you. But you turn the sound down, you watch the actions. You know, that's why silent movies were so successful, because, you know, if someone was tying you to the railroad track, you knew they didn't have their best interest in heart. I mean, it would really throw you off. I love you, baby. I love you. You know? I'm doing this for the train's sake. You know, but that's why the actions are so important, and that's in AA what we did. Guys used to just take you out and have you doing things, picking up ashtrays and emptying coffee cups. If you could do that at Denny's, they call you a busboy. You know, but in AA it's service. It's the idea that you're doing something that's going to benefit the group and someone other than yourself. And in the process of doing these very simple actions, you find out something that you never knew before, and that is that we were collectively and individually so selfish and so self-centered, we didn't know we weren't doing this stuff. We didn't know what we weren't doing. And now we're getting a visual of what we should be doing. And then you get to do the practice of the action over and over and over again until eventually it becomes part of your life. I make my bed every single day. It's the first thing I do when I get out of bed. I go and I read a spiritual book, I take care of some personal business, and then I make my bed. There was a time, my bed was very unimportant. Whether I was in it, somebody else was in it, the dog was in it, it wouldn't make any difference. But today it's important. I do certain things, and I do them because over the long haul, they discipline me to do bigger things. I just get in the habit of doing things until eventually there's no thought waves. You know, one of the great theories of meditation is it puts bigger and bigger gaps between your thoughts. That's what meditation does. It puts big gaps between two thoughts. Because if you have a thought, it's usually about yourself. The 3 words you never want to hear an alcoholic say is, I've been thinking. You know it's about them. You know, it's like a given. And they never just have an idea, they always have a great idea. I have this great idea. My mom knew at an early age that I had something wrong with me. Because she used to walk through the living room, and if I was sitting there thinking, she would say, stop that. Stop that. And if she came back and I still was like in that, she would knock my feet off the table or so, off one of the end table, coffee tables, and she would say, I told you to stop that. Go do something. Because I could take my mind and I could create a bad idea and think it's a good idea. You know, one time I thought selling hearing aids over the telephone was the way to make money, You know? That's just the way things pop into my head. I see signs in stores today where it says, no shirt, no shoes, no service. My mind says, pants are optional. That's just the way it goes, I have absolutely no capacity to stay with what's there. I want to go do something else. I'm always in the middle of thinking of something else. It doesn't make any difference what I'm doing. So what AA has done for me, it's slowed me down. And I have people like that, and I've learned to keep them at bay. I remember one time there's a guy who does the color commentary now in the National Football League, John Madden. But John Madden said that at the end of the half, when he was coaching the Oakland Raiders, he didn't know what to say to these guys, and he'd draw all the diagrams and stuff. So he would always end by saying, this half, let's forget the mule and just load the wagon. And he said the guys would scream and go out, and they'd play great football. He said guys would retire and say, Coach, what the hell does that mean? And he didn't know. He just said, guys, we're going to the Hall of Fame on. Let's forget the mule. Just load that wagon. I have no idea what it means, And then when he came out of coaching, he said, I don't know what it means, But I do that with newcomers today and guys I sponsor. Of course, they pressure sometimes. You know what I mean. You know what it is. They oh, how's this work? And what does he mean by that? And what happened there? And so I always just turn around and I say, the fish in the sea are not thirsty. Then I go get a cup of coffee. And the guy's looking at you like you're Rod Serling, like you just, in the background, you do. And then about a week later, you'll see him with a bunch of his cronies around, and they all have a look like, cats on the freeway. And you hear him saying, the fish in the sea are not thirsty. So it's being passed on. And nobody knows. But guys stay sober. And then you get the intellects. People have credentials of all kinds. Does that apply to the fish in the bay and the stream, They just can't leave it alone. They got like milking a mouse, A lot of activity, but very little results. And you get to see this over and over and over again. And nobody likes to admit that they don't know. I mean, the only time I ever hear an alcoholic say he doesn't know is when he's being indicted. I don't know what it is. Outside of that, we make up an answer. And we make it up because we don't know. And no one likes to say, for whatever reason, I don't know. It seems to be afraid of people. Like, oh, then they'll think I don't know. That's because you don't know. This is really tricky, you know. And that's the way we go through life. Pretending, you know, instead of being. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have steps that allow us to be. Whatever it is. Whatever it is. Whatever God has made us to be, that's what we get a chance to be. You know, I read a story one time where Charlie Chaplin was turning 60. And a group of his friends decided to have a surprise party for him. And in order to have entertainment, they decided to invite the people throughout the world who did the best Charlie Chaplin. And Charlie got wind of it. And he entered the contest. And he came in third. And what you can derive from that is much easier to pretend to be Charlie Chaplin than to be Charlie Chaplin. You know, and that's the way it is in life. It's much easier to pretend. You know, I used to pretend I knew how to read until one day a teacher said to me, "You do not know how to read, you memorize. You have a good memory and you memorize stuff, but you don't know how to read." And she took me aside, and at that time they had comics called classics, and she gave me these classics, and I learned to read Ivanhoe and the Deerslayer from these classic comics. But she took the time to teach me. And then I learned to read. And then I was more comfortable when stuff was passed to me because I'd have some idea on what to do with it. And that has been my whole life. I was so good at pretending that I never learned what I could have learned had I had no pretense. And I find that's true of almost every alcoholic that I meet. When I got here, there was a guy backed me into a corner, and he said one of the most powerful things. All of my life, people kept saying things like, you know, you have to be yourself. You have to. I didn't know what that meant. And one night, when I was about 6 months sober, some guy backed me in a corner, and he said, "Be what you is, and not what you ain't. Because if you is what you ain't what you is." And I thought, that's the clearest I've ever heard that. You know? I now understand. You know, I understand that I'm so occupied pretending to be what I ain't that I never found out what I was. And that's the way most people are in Alcoholics Anonymous. And you heard people here share over the weekend about how people can break away from this thing. And you always have a pretty good idea when they're breaking away because they start working the steps in reverse. The first thing they cut off is service work and going to meetings. Then they cut back on prayer and meditation. There's no need to inventory every day. Then they're looking for folks who owe them amends. And they work themselves back through the steps until they get to step 2, and their insanity is restored. And once your insanity is restored, it's real easy to go drink again. And you watch this, and so you need to come to meetings because this is where you're going to hear what you need to hear. I have a lot of toys in my place. Guys come in and out of my house, and now they don't really need me anymore. They just use the toys. You know, I have a paperweight. It's a snow scene with a big snowman in it. And when guys come and they have a problem, I always say, "Get the snowman and shake it." So he shakes it, and I say, "Put it down on the table. Now tell me about your problem." And of course, while he's talking, you know what's happening. It's all settling down. And when we get 10 minutes into his problem, he'll look at that thing and say, "It's all gone away." And I'll say, "Yeah, because you stopped handling it." You know, we create, just like the book says, we create our own misery. It's not the problem that's the problem. It's our solution to the problem. It's hysterical, you know. Usually it involves more. You know, the logo for AA should be excess is not enough. You know, whatever we're lacking, we want to do it more. I have a guy the other night who called me. He said, "Ken, I finally know what you mean when you say that the easiest time to give something up is right after you did it." And it is, you know. Do you ever notice that nobody's ever going to start a diet or smoking or whatever on Friday? It's always going to be Monday so they can get the weekend out of the way. And that's the way it is in AA. People don't want to take the action because once you start to take the action, you're making a commitment to the program. And it's like, wow, you mean if I show up at this meeting and I start to make coffee, all of a sudden, guess what you are? You're an active member of that group. And it's like, whoa, if you just come in and drift out, it's a whole different deal. And life gets real, real simple when you're sober because there's absolutely nothing to understand. And, I'm one of those guys who have had some very powerful incidents in my life. Not more powerful than you, but for my life, very powerful. When I was a young kid, my dad died. And he died in my arms. I held him while he died. And he was skithering around on the floor, and I thought, my God, I would never do this to my family. He's nothing but a drunk. His feet are knocking around. He can't get his breath. And boom, then he was dead. And I held him in my arms while he died. And I thought, geez, I would never do that to my family. And guess what? Within 10 years after that, I was doing the same stuff that he did. And it wasn't by a designed effort. I just picked up the mantle and started to do it. And people around me told me the same things that my dad was told, and that is, when you get drunk, you do crazy things. I had a way of getting drunk and doing crazy things. And it isn't like I got up in the morning and said, well, I think I'll go out tonight and do crazy things. I at first thought I had lost the ability to communicate with myself, because I would talk to me, but I wouldn't listen to me. I would be at work and I would say, okay, today I'm going straight home. 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 My wife would call and say, are you coming straight home? Straight home. I would get in the car to go straight home and I'd be stopped. Okay, I'm only going to have one. I'm only going to have one. This never worked for you before. I know, but I'm only going to have one. I'm going in, I'm only going to have one. And next thing you know, it's last call. And that happened to me not once, but countless times. So I just thought when I talked to me, I didn't listen. I thought I had a communication problem. There's no sense talking to me because I don't listen. So how can anybody else talk to me? And I learned, too, that I was powerless. I didn't know that I had a disease that was more powerful than me. Somewhere down deep inside of me, because I had taken care of myself so well as a kid and my mom, I thought I could take care of anything. And I didn't realize that I didn't have the power to do what had to be done. I was powerless. The first step tells me that. And then in the 11th step, I get to ask God for some of the use of His power so that I can go do what needs to be done. There's some great lines in the book like, there is one who has all power. Now, unless you have trouble with the word all, it means there's none left for us. There is one who has all power. That means that all of it, period. Now, I don't know what part of that word causes people trouble, whether it's the or the but it's all. I understand what all is. And then when we want to use some power, we ask God through prayer and meditation to give us some power so that we can go do His work. Not do my work, do His work. And it's a simple process. And in AA, no matter what happens, there'll come times when you will either have a breakdown or a breakthrough. And I don't mean you'll go out and drink again. I just mean that life will be so heavy that either you'll have a breakthrough or you'll have a breakdown. I was going along doing AA and doing all the things that I enjoyed doing. And in July of 93, I got a call. I had a son who had just turned 29 that May. He was out traveling around the world. He was doing what he wanted to do. He was getting a chance to sing on a cruise ship that was going around the world, getting paid to see the world. And they called me and said, we're sending your son home. He's sick. And when he arrived home on July 8th, he was in full-blown AIDS. And I had a chance for the next 2 months to hold him in my arms and watch him die. And in the course of that death, he lost his eyesight, he lost his hearing, and eventually he lost his mind. And the bottom line of all of that was I learned again what powerless means. See, powerless is like being voted most attractive in your cell block. It's it's something that you don't like to, you're glad everybody likes you, but you don't want to pick up the award. And in my life, this was something I just could not possibly imagine. I referred to it as a loss of innocence. How could I live the life I was living, again, all caught up in me, and have something like this happen? And during that 2 months, I knew God had a good sense of humor because my ex-wife started coming to my house. I got to meet my husband-in-law. It was. It was a very, very amazing kind of time, and in the course of that, what happened was, my son, who I had raised as a single parent, and I got a chance to just be with one another through a very dark night of our souls. And it ended up that he ended up in September in the hospice facility that I volunteer in. And he stayed there a few days, and he died. And we decided to take him off all the medication. And when we decided to take him off all the medication, he had gone into a semi-coma, which he then came out of. And when he came out of that coma, he wanted to know where he was and what was going on, because he didn't know. And he had his moment of clarity, about 45 minutes, during which time we had to tell him that he was in hospice and there was nothing could be done for him, and they were going to keep him as comfortable as possible, and this was the deal. And all my life I've heard people say being in the world but not being of the world. Well, I got a chance to experience that. Because when my son was told that, he rolled his head to the side of the pillow and tears came out of his eyes for a few minutes, and then he rolled his head back. And when he rolled it over, he was in the world. And when he rolled it back, he was of the world. He thanked his mom for being there. He thanked his brother. I crawled into bed with him, took the side down, and we kind of just held each other. And he told me how much he loved me, and he was glad I was there. And he said, "I'm okay, Dad. I'm okay with this. Just tell me, what are we supposed to do now?" And told him, whenever you're ready to let go, you've had enough of this thing. Just let go. And he said, "Anything else?" And I said, "I don't know how this thing works. There's a lot of theory on it, but someday your brother and mom and I will come to wherever it is. And if you could come meet us, that would make it easier." So he winked and he said, "I can do both of those things." And I got to hold my son as he died, just as I had gotten to hold my dad as he died, just as I had gotten to hold my sister as she died. And something happens to you at that point. You get a chance to look into the abyss, and you see absolutely nothing looking back. And the line that jumps out of the big book to me at that point was, either God is everything or God is nothing. What's your choice to be? And for the first time, I think consciously for the very first time, I came to understand through experience what other people have experienced, and that is the reason God is so important is because in the final analysis, God is all we have. Everything, every single thing in our life, whether we like it or dislike it, is going to be taken away, or we will be taken away from it. And as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a chance to be there. I could have missed it. Had I been drinking, he would have never been with me. Had I been drinking, he wouldn't have been raised by me. So we had a very, very special thing. There was nothing left unsaid. And we did the deal together. And Alcoholics Anonymous at that time played such a tremendous role in my life. People came out of nowhere to be of support. We talk about the footprints in the sand a lot, the poem, The Footprints in the Sand. Well, they weren't singular in my case. My experience was there was all kinds of footprints because people were just coming out of the woodwork to be of service. Guys would call. Guys that didn't take care of themselves would call and want to come do wash and come do things and help me out. And I had a chance to watch other people come forward and help. And they helped in very giving ways, being there, helping out, physically committing, not calling on the phone saying, "How's everything going?" but just showing up. "Hey, I'll do the grocery shop and I'll do this, whatever you need done." And it was an amazing thing. And his friends would come over, and I had this huge bed. He stayed in my room, and he had this huge bed. Get into it, and people would just get in, and we would just hold him. And it was a very, very, very amazing time, because most parents, thank God, don't ever get to experience anything like that. There's a kind of pain that I learned about that never leaves you where it finds you. It's so intense, it takes you to a whole other place. And that pain allows you to experience God in the utmost. It totally consumes you. And what you find out is that you're never alone, and you never have been alone. You know, in the 11th step, in the 12 and 12, there's some great lines. It says something to the effect, and I won't try to do it verbatim, but it says something to the effect that we need God's light of reality. We need God's light of reality. We need God's nourishment for our strength. And we need God's atmosphere for our grace. And that's what you get to experience. The great reality that down deep inside each one of us is something that's much more important than anything else we think we have. And you can't experience that until you give up something. It's a trade-off. You can never get something without giving something up. We got to Alcoholics Anonymous because through the grace of God and this fellowship, we gave up something. And then we were able to get something. Bill Wilson, in one of his writings, says that alcoholics typically give up the best because they settle for something that looks good. And in life, it's always about letting go. And it's an amazing process, because if you're not sober, you don't get to do this stuff. You just don't get to do it. And my other son today, I mean, he's become quite the character. And he was there for his brother. And the hospice program was there. And I sometimes used to share a lot that I volunteer in the hospice program. So I've been there for a lot of people who were just dying. And there's something about death that's not very morbid to me anymore. It's very exciting because it makes you appreciate life. And you realize that everything in nature has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Only man would have the audacity to make a plastic flower. Nature certainly wouldn't make it. And it's in process. And being sober allows you to take life one day at a time and go out and wring the hell out of it. You know, just... And people say, what are you doing? I say, you don't know? I can't tell you, you know. I'm just wringing the hell out of this day. And when I go to bed at night, I say, can't wait to get up tomorrow. You know, we'll get another one, get another one, And that's the way I am. And it scares people. It just scares people. Because they think that you're doing something thinking-wise, that you know something. And what they don't know is you get that feeling when you don't know anything. It's like, I don't know anything. I never did know anything. But now I know I don't know anything. And it cuts down on a lot of dopey questions, People don't ask you stuff when you tell them you're unscarred by education and you don't know anything. You'd be surprised how the conversation gets real, It gets real because you don't know anything? No. Oh, okay, And you never did know anything? No, but I thought I did, like you, And now I have great friendships with people who are just like myself, It's like we're into this activity and we're into this action that all surrounds the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as you're here longer, those of you who have 6 months, a year, whatever, as you're here longer, what you'll come to find out is your perception changes. It just does. The 10th step says it best. It says you're placed into a position of neutrality. You're not cocky. You're not afraid. You're just neutral. People tell you stuff. You just listen. You don't have to have an opinion. My ex-wife has been visiting me. Nothing serious. Just to talk. And you know, when you listen to someone and you do not have an agenda, you hear them. I never knew that. I always thought that you listened with the idea that when they were quiet, you would talk and give them answers to things they never asked you. I've learned more about women as a result of this. Women are not like guys. Guys raise questions. Women just want to talk. I don't mean that to be smart. They don't want answers. They just want you to listen until they're finished. And then when they're finished, you go, is that it? You do that, you'll be dating crazy in AA. You know, like, you'll be dating crazy out of AA. You'd be surprised how many guys never grasp that concept. Husbands don't know that. They always think that when someone starts to talk, particularly their wife or significant other, they're looking for an answer. No, they're just looking for an ear. They don't need anything from us. They just want some bozo to listen, and since you're supposed to be close to them, you're the bozo. And it gets so wonderful because being unscarred by education and not knowing anything, I'm a great... Wow! And you know, you got to be a little animated like Peggy does. Wow! No kidding! Oh! How many times? Oh, wow! And the whole idea is when they're done, they don't even tell you. They're just quiet. And you kind of just wait, because there may be a startup again. Maybe just be recharging the battery, you know. And it gets so peaceful. Life is so peaceful when you don't listen with an agenda. You know, I have guys that don't even need a sponsor in some cases anymore. They run in when I'm not there, and I come out of the bathroom, and somebody is shaking that paperweight. So somebody's been there. And they don't even leave notes anymore. And they come in and they turn on the clown. And now I have a Buddha that no matter how you move it, it laughs. I have a chicken alarm clock that plays a guitar. You push the top of it, whatever you call that, the hood, it goes, wow! And so when guys tell me stuff on the phone, I push that, goes, wow! You know? And you'd be surprised, once people start to laugh, they realize this is really funny. It really is. And it's not about, well, let's get out a piece of paper and let's write legal transcripts of this stuff. Most of the time, people don't want the answer because they already know the answer. They just don't like the one they got. And they're hoping you give them something they haven't thought of, which is much easier than what they know they got to do. So you just sit there and go, mm-hmm. You'd be surprised how cuts down on a lot of chatter. And sooner or later they'll start saying things like, well, I guess I should be doing, and I guess, you know, what you would say is, and I guess what the book says, and they knew all the time. They knew when they got there. I used to be dopey enough to engage in those conversations. Now I just look and smile and go, wow, you know. Me and the chicken have the same line. And you know what? It's the same result. It's the same results. If you're confused about what to do here, pick up the big book. Read it. If you have a question about it, put it down and go to someone and say, this is the way I see this. Is this the way you see this? Go to step studies. You know, there's all kinds of things in AA that give us the answer. And AA is like, it's an allurement. It keeps dragging you in. And as I said, as you're here longer, your perception will change. When I got here, and I hear new people come in all the time, because I go to a lot of meetings. I go to 6, 8, 10 meetings a week. And you hear newcomers share things like, and when I say newcomers, I mean anyone less than 20 years. No, I mean, no, people who are fairly new in the first year or so. And they'll say things, they're always proud of what they lost. I lost everything. And I have nothing. And you know, I identify with that because I used to tell that same crap. But it's a perceptional problem. Because, see, I'm here 24 plus years later, and what I found out is that the everything that I lost has turned out to be nothing. And the nothing that I was left with has turned out to be everything. And I couldn't have told you that in the first year, the first 5 years, because I was still hung up on what I lost. And you can only lose what you don't have. That's a tricky thing. You can only lose what you don't have. So if it's a part of you, then it can't be lost. It's just stuff out there that can be lost. And you get real simple here. And relationships, God, in relationships, you get to be a master. Love has never caused anyone a problem. I'll say that slow because we have a lot of new people. Love has never caused anyone a problem. Expectations of love have caused people a lot of problems. But if you love someone, you don't think in terms of expectation. The minute you start with expectation, it's not love anymore. It's something else. I don't know what it is, but it's not love. And you know, going through this thing with my son, what I could see is that things are very perceptional. My son had a thing called neuropathy, where his nerves would just, you couldn't touch him. He just was in pain all the time. And he went from 194 pounds and he died weighing about 115. And this neuropathy was so powerful that he wanted to use the bathroom to maintain his dignity as long as he could. And I, as a dad, would put pillows on the floor and watch my son crawl to the bathroom. Crawl on his hands and knees and on his stomach so that he could maintain his dignity. And one night when he was crawling back to get back into bed, it hit me so very clearly, another perception. I crawled on the floor and I lost my dignity. My son did the exact same action to maintain his dignity. So crawling on the floor is neither good nor bad. It's just crawling on the floor. It's why are you there? And these things constantly come up today. I have a whole different perception of life. I'm not saying it's better than anyone else. It's my perception. And I got it through experience. I got it through doing something from beginning, middle, and end that 24 plus years ago I couldn't have done. I just wouldn't even have attempted to do it. I would have boogied out. No matter how much I wanted to stay, I would have gone. And I got a chance to do it. And I got a chance to do it because A, I was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and B, I had the support because I was an active member. I had the support of all these people coming into my life. So if you're here tonight and you're confused about any of this stuff, just hang on. You know, just keep coming back to meetings. And watch people who are doing things, because they're probably doing the things that you'll be doing eventually. So you might as well learn how to do them. And don't worry about what you know. In fact, hopefully you'll get decracked. You know? Hopefully you'll go to, you know, and someday it's all gone. You know, and that's real important, because as long as you have the whole card that I know, you don't have the whole card of let go. And that's what this is. Let go, let God. And God will start doing for you those things that need to be done. And it gets very peaceful when you start living life on God's terms. You no longer have to figure it out. And as you go to more and more meetings, you get to watch the real old timers. We have people now with 50 years in our group. 50 years. They don't talk anymore. They just grunt, you know. They say things like, yeah, yep, become the big word, yep. Which means, I really have nothing to say to you. You know? And it doesn't mean like they're looking down. They just know that you got to go through what you got to go through until you don't have to go through it anymore. And alcoholics just don't know how to let go of that. You know, we hang on, and we think hanging on is the deal. You know, I always like to use the analogy of an alcoholic is like someone thrown from a horse, and they grab hold of the stirrup, and they're hitting every speed bump, and they're being dragged around a parking lot that's just been re-graveled. And their friends and people who really care for them are yelling out things like, let go. Let go. And they're saying things like, who, me? You know? And if they're very educated, they'll start spending large sums of money trying to figure out how to enjoy the ride, you know. I'll go to the seminar on how to get dragged, you know. But, you know, the nice part about Alcoholics Anonymous is as you hear longer, you realize that everybody is doing the best they can. If they could do any better, they'd be doing it. And you learn that guilt is just another side of ego. Guilt is just the flip side of ego. You know, if you can't be the very best, you're going to be the very worst. Well, when I drank, I was the worst. No. You weren't even near. You know, nobody's the worst and nobody's the best. The deal is we get to that state of neutrality. And what you find out is when you start doing a 10-step on a daily basis, one of the things it talks about is what? We stop fighting everyone and everything. There's nothing to be fought. You want to think that way? Think that way. You'll live with those results. I don't have to change you. All I have to do is allow you to be and take you to meetings and be part of you until you can get the truth you need. That's why the old timers say things like, know the truth and the truth will set you free. I thought, well, that's obvious. If you know the truth, it will set you free. But you know what's interesting about the truth? The truth is the truth. You don't have to think about it anymore. So the ego's out of there. It's just the truth. This is the truth. You know? And you hear people say the dumbest things today, like the world's going to hell. No. You're going to hell. The world is just fine. You know? Gravity still works. Last time I looked, all the planets are spinning on the proper axis in the proper orbit. All the laws of quantum physics are still working. So maybe you're going to hell. The world's doing just great. But you want to take the rest of us with you. You know? And we're not ready for the trip. Because we have things to do here. So what we say is, let's go to a meeting. Let's do this. Let's take an action. Let's start thinking less about ourselves and more about somebody else. And you know, when you start that pattern in your life, it gets easier and easier. Someday we're all going to check out of here. Someday our ticket will get punched and we'll all go back to where we come from. And I think you only get asked two questions. And that is, did you become you? I sent you out to become you. Did you become you? And the second question is, did you have a good time? You know? Hope you had a lot of laughs, because we were having a lot of laughs watching you. You know, I know God must be up there with a yuck all the time, you know. He gave man his sexual peak at 20 and woman hers at 40. You know? Yeah, go work with this. You know? It just works that way, you know. It's just amazing how it all works. I was leaving home the other day to go to the airport to come here, and I had a call, and I was talking with a guy at 5 o'clock in the morning because he knew I was leaving town. And what he said was very interesting. He said, "When you go away for the weekend, I don't laugh as much." He said, "When you come home, even though I don't see you, I start laughing." He said, "Because I know you're doing something." He said, "And I know it's not orthodox." He said, "You're not an orthodox person." And you know, the other day I was in a store, I was in the shopping store, and somebody came over and they said, "I got to talk to you." And they were manufacturing all these problems. So I said, "Come on, let's go down this aisle." So without them even knowing what I was doing, they were all caught up in themselves. I moved a whole thing of tissue paper, and we sat down on that rack. I thought it was very appropriate, being on all that tissue paper with what he was telling me, you know? And then finally he said, "We're sitting in toilet paper." I said, "I think you're getting it." You know? And that's why I love to come and do these. I love to have people laugh. I love to see them laugh because I know some things about laughter that most people don't know. And that is you cannot laugh and think at the same time. So every time you're laughing, you're getting at least a respite from your favorite topic, which is you. And the other thing I know is that when you're laughing, you produce all kinds of things in your body that give you more oxygen, help you fight pain, just all kinds of stuff. And you know, there's a book out now written by a guy by the name of Dean Ornish. He's a cardiologist over in Texas. And he's doing the same thing with laughter and with meditation. Laughter and meditation. And prayer. And what they have now established, it's documented, is that they have taken two groups of people who have had heart surgery, the same heart surgery. One was a placebo group. They didn't know what was being done. Nothing was being done. The other group was being prayed for by people all over the country. And the group that was being prayed for survived 90% better than the group that wasn't being prayed for. 90%. So they thought, freak thing, let's try it again. They tried it again, same results. When you're being prayed for, somebody said today, you prayed in here. I think it was maybe Carl this afternoon. But it was like, you're prayed in here. You know, prayer is a very powerful force because it's a cry of the heart. It's telling God, I don't know. I need your help. I'm rendered helpless. Please come and give me the answer. And not only give me the answer, but in accordance with this 11th step, please give me the power I need to do that answer. I just don't have it. And the reality of sobriety is you get what you need. And if you're sitting in a chair tonight here, you've gotten everything you needed up to now, whether you perceived it to be good or bad, you've got exactly what you needed. Some of you will participate in the dance. You may not get what you need. But go anyway, you know. There may be someone there who is sick. And you can carry the message. You know? And you know, in relationships that I see, the reason people have trouble is because they're looking for a custom fit in an off-the-rack world. You know, nobody's perfect. Everybody's in process. Everybody's in process. You know, there's a Buddha story that I love, and it's Buddha used to go around and talk in towns, and one day this man came up to Buddha while he was talking to him, and he slapped him. And he went home. And he must have been alcoholic, and he must have inventoried, and the next day he stood in line, and he got up to Buddha again, and he said to Buddha, I owe you an amends. And Buddha said, why? And he said, because yesterday I slapped your face. And Buddha said, friend, you owe me no amends, because the man whose face you slapped no longer exists. And it's quite obvious that the man who slapped that face no longer exists. We are in a constant state of growing and growing and growing. And it's like the tide. It goes out, it comes in. And when you see it going away, you want to chase after it. Things aren't going your way. I've been there. And I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that if I stand still and I do the drill, what happens is what I need comes back. And what I don't need stays away. And life is real enjoyable. I don't want to drink anymore, not because I'm afraid of what might happen. I don't want to drink anymore because right now this is the very best it's ever been for me. This is the happiest I've ever been. This is the most content I've ever been. Because now I know the game. I know what's behind curtain number 1, and I know what's behind curtain number 2. And now I'm looking for curtain number 3. And I know what it is that if I'm meant to have it, I'll have it. If I'm not meant to have it, I won't have it. If it's God's will for me, I can't screw it up enough to lose it. And if it's not God's will for me, then I can't do enough to get it. It just doesn't work that way. And I'm real happy to be invited to come here tonight because this keeps me active. There was a time when everything happened in my life, I had to cancel a lot of AA commitments because my commitment was to my son and to be there for him. And during that time, I realized that all the stuff, for the want of another word, that I had done prior to that allowed me to do what now was right in front of me. And he and I used to chat. And there's something about laying in the dark with the lights out, holding someone you love, and knowing it's not going to get any better. And what happens is you develop night eyes. You develop the ability to see in the dark. And you get to feel someone else's heartbeat beating right next to yours. And what my son had said at one point, which really was great for me as a dad, was he said, when I was small and I used to crawl into bed with you, when I was afraid, I would feel safe because I knew you were awake. Please stay awake with me tonight. Simple request. And I come to find out that not every day is a 24-hour day. Some days run for weeks and months. They're not 24-hour days. But if you did the things that were suggested to you by the people who were here before you who blazed the path, you'll find out you always have the courage to do the next indicated thing. And you have the courage simply because you know that's the drill. And there's no need to figure out anything. I know there's a dance. I don't want anybody to miss their chance to get hurt. I want to thank you for allowing me to come here. And I want to end with a little story about Apollinaire. Apollinaire talks about the master. And he says, the master says to the people, come down to the edge. And the people say, no, we're afraid. And the master says to the people, come down to the edge. And they say, no, it's too high, we might fall. And the master says to the people, come down to the edge. And they come. And he pushes them off. And they fly. And they know for the first time that fear is not a reality. There is only one reality, the reality of a loving God. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, that message is delivered every day throughout the world when one alcoholic goes and says to another alcoholic, I don't know where you're at exactly, but I've been in similar situations. Come with me. We have a solution on which we can all agree. And that solution is the text of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's the Spirit of God working in each person. And if you have someone, for whatever reason, that you've drifted apart from, and they're alive, please, please don't waste the opportunity in the near future, hopefully tonight, to just call them and say, I don't know what is with you, but it isn't with me anymore. It's an amazing thing how you find out you're hurting over things you think you've safely tucked away. And how you can't really live life until you're in that state of neutrality, where even the people who bug you don't bug you. You know? You just, thank you, God, you know. And one of the great lessons here is that we have to take real good care of one another because we're only on loan. Next year when you have this thing, there'll be people who are here tonight who won't be here. Some will be drunk. Some will be dead. Some will be sick. Some will be with other people who are sick. But you'll never have this group as it exists tonight together again, anywhere, anytime. It will be different. And so the whole idea is to live in this moment and not to let it get away. I love being sober. I love the ability to come to these things and be met by friends and do all the things that we do. But most important, I love it at night when I put my head on my pillow and my conscience is clear, and I can go to sleep. And I realize nobody owes me anything. This is the best it's ever been. I used to have a guy who came to my house who was an Indian. And whenever he came in, he would put his hands together and he would say, "Namaste, Ken." And Namaste translated means the God in me is looking for the God in you. And as long as the God in me is looking for the God in you, we'll never hurt one another. And if any time you're not sure that you don't know and you need a visual demonstration, just ask yourself this very simple question. Which hand do I think is my strongest hand? My right hand or my left hand? And almost everybody will tell you one hand or the other. And if you take those two hands and push them together, what you find out is they have equal strength. And the reason they have equal strength is because the power that's being generated is all coming from one place. And the power to change is being resisted in our lives by the power not to change. It's an equal force. So what we learn in Alcoholics Anonymous is to take the pressure off, to hold the same prayer position, and to ask God to do for us those things we can't do. And your answers will come. And you come to the realization that there really is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Namaste. God bless you.